for 66. At 66 I have. At 66 looking for 68. At 68,000 rand I have. At 68 I'm looking for 70. At 70,000 rand I'm looking for 70,000 rand. I'm sitting at 68. I'm looking at 68. 70,000. At 70,000 I'm looking for 72. At 70,000 I'm looking for 72 I have. At 72,000 rand I have. At 72,000 I have. Sorry, we're just waiting for the system to catch up. I'm looking for 74. I'm looking for 74. At 72,000 I have. 74. Let's drop it bar. Let's go for 76. At 74,000 I'm looking for 76. At 74,000 I'm looking for 76. At 74,000 let's try 1,000. Let's try 1,000. At 74 I'm looking for 75. At 74,000 I'm looking for 75. No more at 74. Let's try 500. Let's try 500. 74,000 I'm looking for 74 and a half. Guys, it's a 2020 Hyundai RC, and you can start it here, but you can. At 74,000 rand we got. Looking for 75. No more at 74. 74 for the first. 74 for the second. 74 for the third and final call. Are you going to put your hand up? Sold at 74,000. Buyer number 1126. Sold. Okay. Lot number 13 is an absolutely marvelous 2014 Audi A3 cabriolet, and the roof works. Guys, impress your neighbors. Look at that. Sorry guys, there's somebody here that's trying to connect to the TV Wi-Fi that's putting the Wi-Fi off. Whoever's got their Wi-Fi and is trying to connect to the TV, please can you refrain from doing it? Lot number 13. 2014 Audi Cabriolet. We are looking for 100. Ooh, we got 100. We have 100,000 rand. At 100,000, let's go up in twos. Let's go up in twos. At 100,000, we're looking for 102. At 102, I have. At 102, I'm looking for 104. At 102, I'm looking for 104. At 104, I have. At 104, 106. At 106, 108. At 106, I've got 108. At 108, I've got online. I've got 100. We got 110. At 110 we have. At 110 we have. At 110 we're looking for 112. At 112 we have. 114. At 114 we got. 116 we have. At 118 we have. At 118 we got to the floor. At 118, 120 online. At 120 we got. At 100, let's go 122. At 122 we have. At 122 we have no more. Guys, at 122,000 rand. For an Audi Cabriolet, the roof works. Let's drop it to 1. Let's drop it to 1. At 122,000 rand we have. I'm looking for 123. Let's drop it by 500. We've got 123. I'll give you a half. 123 and a half. 123 and a half online. 124. At 124 I have. At 124,000 I have. At 124,000 for the first. Please don't put your hand up at auction. At 124 and a half online. At 124,500 online. Guys, we're going to sell it subject to confirmation. You want to go 125. It's not money. The price you bid is the price you pay. At 124,500, no more. At 124.5 for the first. At 125. At 125,000 we have. At 125,000 for the first. At 125,000 for the second. For 125,000 for the third and final call. No more. 125.5. At 125 and a half, 126. At 126,000 we have. At 126,000 we have. 126 and a half. At 126 and a half we're looking for 127. At 126 and a half we're looking for 127. At 126 and a half for the first, 126 and a half for the second, 126 and a half for the third and final call. No more. Sold, subject to confirmation at 126 and a half thousand to buyer 275. Lot number 14. We are sitting with a current bid of 60,000 rand for a 2017 Kia Picanto. Guys, with the price of fuel at the moment, this is the right car for you guys. Can I have a bid at 61? We are sitting at 60,000 rand. Can I have 61? Guys, this is not a price to pay for this car. At 61,000 rand we have. At 62 we have. At 62 we got 63. At 63,000 we have. At 63 we got 64. At 64 I got 65. At 65 I got 66. At 66 I got 67. At 67 I have. At 67 I got 68. At 68,000 rand I have. At 68,000 rand I got 60. Oh, I got 70. At 70,000 rand I have. At 70,000 I'm looking for 71. At 70,000 I'm looking for 71. At 70,000 no more. Let's try a half. Let's try a half. At 71 we have. At 71,000 rand we have. At 71 we're looking for 72. At 72 we have. At 71 and a half. Looking for 72. At 71 and a half we have. Looking for 72. At 71 and a half I'm looking for 72. No more at 71 and a half. Going for the first bid. At 72 to the floor. At 72 I have. Looking for 72 and a half. At 72 and a half we're looking for. No more. 72 and a half. At 72 and a half I have. Online first. At 72 and a half. Anybody want to go 73? 73. At 73 looking for 73 and a half. At 73 we're looking for 73 and a half. I have 73 and a half. At 74. At 74,000 rand I have. At 74 looking for 74 and a half. At 74 and a half I have. Looking for 75, man. Remember, the price that you bid is the price that you are going to pay. At 74 and a half I have online. One more, do you want to go? At 74 and a half, you want to go 75? You want to go 75? 75 I have. At 75 I have to the floor. At 75,000 looking for 75 and a half. At 75 and a half looking for 76. Looking for 76. Looking for 76. Is there any movement at 75 and a half? 76 you want to go, man? 76 you want to go, sir? No more 75 and a half. Going for the first. At 75 and a half for the second. At 75 and a half for the third and final call. No more. Sold. 75 and a half. To buyer 1030.
Okay, this is Oko in Devon.
Lot number 15 is a 2012 Polo Vivo 6 1.4. We have got a current bid of 75,500 rand. And now what happened? We got the current bid of 71,000 rand. At 71,000 rand we're looking for 72. At 71,000 we're looking for 72. At 72 we have. At 72,000 looking for 73 we have. At 73 we got 74. At 74 I got 75. At 75 I got 76. At 76 we got 77. At 77,000 rand we have. At 77,000 rand we got 78. At 78 we got 79. At 79 I'm looking for 80. At 80 I'm looking for 81. 81 I'm looking for 82. At 81 I'm looking for 82. At 81 I have no more at 81. Let's drop it by 500. I have lost all my connection. At 82 I have got 82. At 82 I've got 86. At 86,000 rand I have. At 86,000 rand. 86 and a half. 86 and a half. 87. At 87,000 I'm looking for 87. 87 and a half. At 87 and a half, I'm looking for 88. At 87 and a half, I'm looking for 88. At 87 and a half, no more at 87, 88. At 88, at 88 and a half. At 88 and a half, I'm looking for 89. At 88 and a half, I'm looking for 89. No more at 88 and a half. 88 and a half going for the first. At 88 and a half going for the second. At 88 and a half for the third and final call. No more. Sold at 88 and a half to buyer 1020. Lot number 16, we are sitting with a 2019 Datsun Go Plus. That means it's a 7-seater. You can use this vehicle for your Uber. We are sitting at 59,000 Rand. Can I get 60? We are sitting at 59,000 Rand. Can I get 60? Can I get 59 and a half? Bid. At 59 and a half I have. At 59 and a half, can I get 60? Sorry. At 60,000 Rand I have online. 60,000 Rand I have online. Can I get 60 and a half, man? Can I get 60 and a half? 60,000 Rand I have online.
60,000.
No more at 60,000. 60 and a half. 61. At 61, can we go back up to ones, please? At 61,000 to the lady here. At 61,000, I'm looking for 62. At 62, I have. At 62,000, I have. At 62, I'm looking for 63. At 62,000 Rand, I have, looking for 63. At 62,000 Rand, no more. 63. 64 if you want, sir. 64 if you want. I'm sitting at 63,000. 64 if you want. 64. At 64,000 Rand I have. At 64 looking for 65. At 64,000 Rand I'm looking for 65. No more at 64,000. 65 I have. I've got 65. Looking for 66. 66. At 66,000 Rand I have. At 66,000 can I drop it by 500? At 66 and a half. I'm looking at 66 and a half. Is there no more at 66,000? 66 and a half, 67. At 67 I have. At 67 looking for a half. At 67 I have looking for a half. At 66,000, 67 and a half. At 67 and a half I have. 68, 67, 68. At 68,000 Rand looking for a half. At 68,000 looking for a half. You're going to walk home. At 67, 68,000, 68 and a half. One more try. 68 and a half. At 68 and a half, no more. At 68 and a half for the first. At 68 and a half for the second. 68 and a half for the third and final call. No more. Sold. Subject to confirmation at 68 and a half. 273. 68,500 subject to confirmation to buyer 273. Lot number 17 is a 2006 BMW X3 automatic, and we are sitting at 46,000 Rand, 47,000 Rand, 48,000, 49 when we get to 50 go in twos. At 49 we got. At 50 go in twos. At 50 looking for 52. At 50,000 we're looking at 52. At 50,000 we're looking at 52. At 50,000 I'm looking at 52. For a BMW X3, chaps. At 52 I have. At 52,000 looking for 54. At 52,000 I'm looking for 54. No more at 52,000. Let's drop it back down to ones. At 52, let's take 53. At 52, let's take 53. No more at 52. 53 we have. At 53, I'm looking for 54. At 53, I'm looking for 54. At 53, 55. At 55, 56. At 56, we're looking for 57. At 56 we're looking for 57. At 57 we have. At 57 we're looking at 58. No more at 57. Looking for 58. Guys, it's a BMW. The price you bid is the price you pay. At 57,000 Rand for a BMW X3 automatic. Let's try 500. Let's try 500. At 57 and a half. Can we get a half? Can we get a half? At 57,000, no more. Going for the second. At 57 for the third and final call. Sold, subject to confirmation at 57,000 to buy a 1076. Lot number 18 is a 2011 VW Golf 6. .4 TSI, and we have got a current bid of 57,000 Rand. Now we're sitting at 55,000 Rand. Let's go up. As soon as we get to 56, we're going to go up in twos. At 55,000, looking for 56. At 55,000, looking for 56. No more at 55. At 56, I have. At 56, I have. Looking for 58. At 58, I have. Looking for 60. At 58, I have. I'm looking for 60. At 58, I'm looking for 60. Come on, guys. A 2011 VW Golf 6 at 58,000 Rand. Your bid price is what you are going to pay. No more at 58. At 58,000, this car is going to remain unsold. No more. Unsold. Pass it through. Lot number 19, 2015 Fiat 500. Guys, what a fantastic car. We're looking for 70,000. We're looking for 70,000. Sure, that doesn't look like there's anybody else about it. 70,000 we got. That's 70,000 we got. You don't get above. You don't. At 70,000, we're looking for 72. At 70,000, I'm looking for 72. At 70,000, I'm looking for 72. At 72, I have. At 72, I have. I'm looking for 74. At 72, I'm looking for 74. At 72, I'm looking for 74.
Sometimes it's Tuesday.
No more. At 72,000 Rand. Guys, this is ridiculous.
So you just
At
check
2015 Fiat 500 above. At 72. At 74. At 74, I'm looking for 76. At 74, I'm looking for 76. Let's try 75. Let's try 75. At 74,000, let's look at 75. No more at 74. No more at 74. Let's try it subject to confirmation. I doubt whether it'll go through. Going 74 for the first. At 74 for the second. At 74 for the third and final call. No more. Sold subject to confirmation. 74,000 to buyer 1126. Lot number 20. 2018 Hyundai Grand R10 1.1. We have a current bid of 85,000. Can we get 86? At 85,000, I'm looking for 86. At 85,000, I'm looking for 86. At 85,000 Rand, 86 I have. At 86,000, I'm looking for 87. At 86,000, I'm looking for 87. At 86,000, I'm looking for 87. Come on, guys. At 87,000 Rand, I have. At 87,000 Rand, I'm looking for 88. At 87,000, I'm looking for 88. At 87, I'm looking for 88. No more at 87,000. A 2018 Hyundai R10. The bid price is what are you going to pay? That's for nothing, guys. 95,000 Ks on the clock. At 87,000 Rand I have. Let's drop it by 88. At 88,000 I have. At 88,000 I'm looking for 89. At 88,000 I'm looking for 89. No more at 88,000. 89. At 89 I have to the floor. At 89,000 Rand I'm looking for 90. At 89 I'm looking for 90. At 89,000 I'm looking for 90. At 90 I have. At 90 I have. At 90 I have. I'm looking for 91. At 90,000 Rand I have. I'm looking for 91. No more at 90,000. Let's drop it by 500. Let's drop it by 500. I'm looking for 90 and a half. At 90,500. At 90,500, you want to go? At 90,500. At 90,500, no more. Look, you want 91. I got 90,500. You want 91. At 91,000 Rand I have. At 91,000 Rand I have. I'm looking for 91 and a half. At 91,000 Rand I have. No more 91,000. At 91,000 for the first. At 91,000 for the second. At 91,000 for the third and final call. No more. Sold, subject to confirmation. 91,000 to buyer 271. Lot number 21 is a 2011 Renault Clio. What a fantastic color. How's those stripes on it? We got a current bid of 35,000 Rand. At 35,000 Rand for this absolutely phenomenal color. At 31 we're looking at 36. At 36,000 Rand we have looking for 37. At 37 I have, I'm looking for 38. At 38,000 Rand I'm have. At 38,000 I've got already. At 38,000 I'm looking for 39. At 38,000 I'm looking for 39. At 39 I have. At 39,000 Rand I'm looking for 40. At 39,000 Rand I'm looking for 40. At 40 I have online. At 40,000 I'm looking for 41. At 40,000 I'm looking for 41 I have. At 41,000 I'm looking for 42. At 41,000 I'm looking for 42. At 42 I have. At 42,000 I'm looking for 43. At 42,000 I'm looking for 43. No more at 42,000. Let's try a half. Let's try a half. At 42,000 I'm looking for 42 and a half. At 42,000 I'm looking for 42 and a half. No more at 42. 42,000 for the first. At 42,000 for the second. At 42,000 for the third and final call. No more. Sold, subject to confirmation. 42,000 to buyer 1076.
This auction is in Durban at the workshop at Oko.
Lot number 22 is a 2024 Figo 1.5. It is a fleet vehicle and it'll have to be made subject to confirmation. Guys, it's not a repossession, it's a fleet, which means it had to be maintained. I think you've been looking for that. I was sitting on it, I apologize. Okay. At 63,000 Rand we have. At 63,000 Rand we have. At 63 we're looking for 64. At 63 for a fleet maintained vehicle. We are looking for 64. At 63,000 Rand no more.
We're in Durban at the workshop.
You got to be kidding me, guys. For a fully maintained fleet vehicle at 64,000 Rand. At 64, looking at 65, I got to the floor. At 65, online first, sorry about that. You want to go 66. At 65, I have. At 65, I have. At 65, I got 67, 68 to the floor. 68 online. 69 if you want. At 68,000 Rand, I have. 69. At 69,000 Rand I've got. At 69,000 Rand I'm looking for 70. By a 10, got him. At 70,000 I have. I'm looking for 71. At 71. At 71. At 71. 71 I have. At 71,000 Rand I have to the floor. At 71 I have. You want to go 72 is online. At 72 is online. At 72 I'm looking for 73 I go. At 73 I have. At buyer 1095. 74. At 74 I'm looking for 75. 75 I got online first. Looking for 76. 76, 77. At 77 I got to the back right. At 77 I got to the back right. At 77 I have 78. At 78,000 Rand. You want to go 80 soon? I got 79. You want to go 80? 79, 80 I have. At 80,000 rand I have. At 80,000 looking for 81. At 80,000 I'm looking for 81. No more at 80,000, 81. At 81 is online first, before you. At 81 I'm looking for 82. At 81's online, looking for 82, 82. At 82,000 rand I have. At 82,000 rand I am looking for 83. At 82,000 rand I have, looking for 83. Let's drop it by 500. Online at 83. Online at 83. Looking at 84. I can go 84. 83 and a half. 83 and a half, do you want? At 83,000 I've got. No more at 83,000. 84. 84. 84 to the lady. At 84,000 rand I have. At 84 looking for 84 and a half. 84 I have. 84 and a half online. At 84 and a half looking for 85. At 84 and a half I'm looking for 85. 84 is the price you are going to pay, guys. That's an absolute steal. At 85,000 rand online. No more at 85. I have gone off. 85 and a half. At 85 and a half I have. No more at 85 and a half. Looking for 86. 86 I have. At 86,000 looking for 86 and a half. At 86 I have, looking for 86 and a half. No more at 86. Going for the first. At 86 for the second. At 86 for the third and final call. No more. Sold, subject to confirmation. 86,000 to buyer 1081.
86,000, and 86,000 is what you're going to pay. No VAT, no buyer's commission, nothing. So the price you paid is the price you're going to pay. That is the deal today. That is the deal of the day.
Lot number 23 is a 2006 Mitsubishi Colt 2.8D single cab with a canopy. Guys, we all know what a canopy is worth, and we've got a current bid of 65,000 rand. For a single cab bucky with a canopy. You don't find them. Can I get 66? I've got 65. Can I get 66? At 65,000 rand, no more. No movement. At 65,000 rand, this vehicle is going to remain unsold. Going for the first. Going for the second. Going for the third and final call. No sale. Lot number 24 for all the Mercedes-Benz favorites out there. 2011 Mercedes-Benz B180 Avant-Garde automatic. Absolutely lovely vehicle here. Can I get 55,000 rand to start me? For a Mercedes-Benz vehicle, guys. 55,000 rand. I don't know what's going on here today. Sorry guys, the event, the computers are not working.